Howdy, and welcome to another episode of Adult Onset Horsemanship. I'm your host, Daniel Dauphin.
We're going to change things up a little bit this week. We haven't done a Q&A in quite a while, and I did have several people reach out and wonder when I was going to be doing another one of these. So here it is. I've pulled some questions that I've gotten in my inbox and also some things that were talked about on Bits, Spurs, and Good Sense, the Facebook group that we have where people can ask questions and interact with me in that group setting. And then also just a couple thoughts I had. There was a podcast I listened to while I was driving yesterday, and some things that were said in that I thought were worth addressing and bringing back up. So let's get started. The first thing that I want to bring up is the conversation that I heard in the podcast. It was a bit fitter that was being interviewed, and there was a specific comment in there. There were several things I would have taken exception to, but this was kind of the big one. She mentioned that the center of the tongue is basically not a very sensitive area. And I couldn't disagree with that more strongly. I don't want to say, she was talking about bits with tongue relief and how they put more pressure on the outsides of the tongue and onto the bars of the horse's mouth. That's completely true. I don't deny or disagree with any part of that. What I specifically disagree with is the notion that some people have. I've seen another clinician bring this up, that they kind of think of the tongue as this big pad that is there to protect the bars of the mouth and displace pressure from the bit. And that is really the wrong way to think about it. The tongue really and truly is one of the most sensitive parts of the horse's entire body. And if we think about the tongue, neurologically speaking, that center line that we see in the tongue is where the lingual nerve resides. You could think of it kind of like a tree with the trunk that goes down the center of the tongue, and then you have the smaller nerves, the branches of the tree that go out to the side. Anyone that's ever had like sciatic nerve pain or a radial nerve in your arm that hurts, or a pinched nerve that you might get in your neck would agree with me that pressure on a main branch nerve is extremely uncomfortable. So the notion that we're safe putting pressure on the center of the tongue and that's a relatively insensitive part of the horse is just completely wrong. That's not a true or a good statement anyway, shape, or form. A big part of what I try to teach people regarding bits is in the setup of things and the things that you can't change. Part of that is the anatomy of the horse and the way that it functions, and you're trying to work with that, not against it. So just keep in mind that your success in having good communication with your horse is more determined by your relationship specifically with their tongue than any other single factor. The tongue is where it's all at. You need to have the tongue in mind. You need to feel the tongue when you pick up on the reins. If you compress the tongue, you should know that. By the time you get to bar pressure, all of the good parts of the mouth have been exhausted. I had another person made a comment on a Facebook post recently about the lips and the corners of the mouth being relatively insensitive. Once again, that is absolutely not true. You need to think of the soft parts of that horse's mouth as being the good parts of that horse's mouth. That's where you want to be communicating. That whole ability to pick up the reins and move the bit and compress or move or wiggle those soft tissues, the tongue and the lips and the corners, that is where it's all at. It's when you go beyond that, past it, speed through it, that's when you're running into problems and you're overloading, overwhelming the horse's mouth, and you're going to get into bracing responses. So just keep that in mind. The tongue is in no way, shape, or form some big convenient pad in the horse's mouth. It is the thing you're going to offend and ruin the whole deal if you do offend it. So another post that had come in to Bit Spurs in Good Sense was about mechanical hackamores. If you're not aware, mechanical hackamores aren't super common, and you may not be familiar with them. That is basically a hackamore that has shanks on it. So we've taken, there's no bit. We've got all of the pressure outside of the horse's face, outside of the mouth. So we're going to put pressure on the nose and the chin predominantly, but we do have a shank on there, which means that we're going to introduce leverage specifically in the manner of multiplication of force. So that is how most people think of leverage. That's not a complete picture of what leverage is, but it's the part that matters for a mechanical hackamore. So if you look again at a horse's skull, you will see the nasal bones and how thin and frail they are. I'm not a fan of mechanical hackamores. Again, here, I want to be very clear that I'm distinctively talking about mechanical hackamores. Hackamores without the shanks on them is really a whole different ball of wax. And I'm not talking poorly about them. One of the other parts about mechanical hackamores is that they're not terribly lateral. And a lot of times when you see them used, they're often used on horses where the claim is he hates a bit or he doesn't get along with the bit. I've dealt with a lot of these, and 9 times out of 10, that's actually a horse that's not correctly educated to the bit, and they needed to go a lot slower, break things down into very small, simple, fundamental steps, which all should begin with lateral flexion, just yielding to the bit side to side, and slow and easy, and then doing that at the walk and little circles. And so we have a horse that has that problem of not understanding how to yield his neck, his face, his feet. And then we put him in a device like a mechanical hackamore that isn't terribly lateral. And so for most of the horses that are wearing those things, because they're avoiding bit problems, they have actually gone to a device that mechanically does not lend itself to the things that they actually need to do to solve the horse's training problems. So it's just one of those things that's almost never the right answer. Yes, I'm pretty heavily biased against them. There would be 1,000 different types of bridles and things I would put on a horse. I would ride a horse in a halter before I would ride them in a mechanical hackamore. It's just kind of almost never the right answer. And the way that they function mechanically, that whole leverage on the thin nasal bones, I have unfortunately had cause to see a horse that had its nasal bones crushed, where when it was trying to inhale, the skin was flapping in and out as it was trying to suck in air. It was a very disgusting sight, something I don't ever want to see again. And I am very leery of any kind of device that puts a lot of pressure on the nasal bones of a horse. So is it evil? No, but there are definitely better solutions out there than mechanical hackamores. Just is a poor tool. We've got better tools, and again, doesn't lend itself to actually fixing the problem that the vast majority of those horses actually have. I also wanted to get into equine pain and dysfunction. I had someone send me a rather long email on this, and I know we've talked a lot about the animal husbandry, biomechanics, abuse within the industry. I know that's been a theme in a lot of the previous 4, 5, 6 podcasts, and maybe y'all are getting sick of listening to me drone on about my thoughts on that. I do want to bring up one aspect to that. We tend to find dysfunction in horses that we're dealing with, domesticated animals in captivity that are owned by somebody. We also very commonly make reference to wild horses and, but we don't see this in wild horses and things like that. And there was a particular something that sent my mind in this direction. Wild horses definitely still have lameness problems and dysfunction. If you watch some of those types of horses, I've had cause to deal with some Mustangs, and it's not uncommon that they don't necessarily take both leads. You may really have some issue with that because there's nothing in the wild that dictates to the horse that you have to have a left and a right lead. You could pretty commonly come across some that crossfire. The only real athletic endeavor that those horses are ever going to come across is running fast enough to evade the very few predators that they might have, a bear or something along those lines. And they're going to have to be pretty crippled up to not successfully negotiate that. And so we make this broad assumption that horses in the wild don't ever get lame, that like you can't put hands on a Mustang. So how are you going to tell me that none of them have SI joint problems or hocks that are fusing early or some of these problems? We definitively don't put hands on these horses to discover any of these issues. So we hear those kinds of claims about, well, the wild horses don't this and that. You always just have to be pretty mindful about the realities of that situation. There are lots of things that happen with wild horses that you probably wouldn't consider good. For instance, every 15 to 18-month-old filly who starts cycling is going to be covered by a stallion who may or may not be her sire. We wouldn't intentionally do that in our world. It's definitely commonplace in that world. So when we're going to talk about the natural order of things, we can't cherry pick the parts of it we think are preferable. You got to look at all of it. It's not all great. It's not all wonderful. And we don't definitively know near as much about it as we want, especially in terms of what's lame and whatnot. All you can see is the horse 600 yards away that's obviously very, very lame. You don't get the opportunity for someone to trot that horse for you in hand 15 feet away, and you watch him turn this way and turn that way and come back inside profile and all of the things. You know, if you've been down the rabbit hole of trying to find a mystery lameness in a horse, you know how extensive that process can be. We certainly don't have that ability with these wild horses. So we cannot responsibly make claims about how sound they are versus the horses that we've got. A lot of that stuff is an assumption and maybe not the strongest case to make if you're trying to make a case. Another, this is this is a perennial question. And it's one I don't know that I definitely don't have a hard and fast answer for you. And this is about who to follow, how to find the right person, whichever clinician or guru or whatever you want to call them to learn from. First of all, I would say don't follow one. You know, there's a lot of pretty darn competent people out there, which means we've got a lot of different points of view and different experiences and backgrounds. And I'm really pretty enthusiastic about all of the bright spots I find in this world. There are some very intelligent people, very thoughtful, very experienced, that are bringing ideas and articulating thoughts that are extremely helpful and inspiring and good. And so I would not encourage you to do the guru following thing where you pick one person and spend $80,000 with them trying to follow them around like the Grateful Dead or something. That, you know, I know plenty of people that have done that. That seldom ends well. I would really encourage you, first of all, watch the people work a horse. There's a lot of video and stuff out there nowadays, so you don't even have to travel. You could be following someone on a different continent and watch them work a horse and be honest about what you see. One of the really good tricks is to watch let's say you got a 10-minute clip of them working a horse. Watch it first without sound. Don't listen to what they're saying, just watch. And then watch it again with sound and see if you get two different impressions, or if they were actually consistent. Sometimes you definitely will come across people that what they say and what they do don't match. It's going to be pretty difficult for me to take that person seriously and to learn from them and respectfully follow them if I find they're hypocritical or conflicting in what they say and what they do. Another part of that is that you basically need to like what you see. If you watch this person work 10 horses and they're all really high-headed, and that might be kind of a sign that there are some things this person does that you probably don't want in your own world. You don't want to see your horse riding like their horses tend to. So again, watch them and try to watch them with multiple horses. There are certain people, again, I don't think you need to follow one person, but there are people that excel in certain areas of this deal. I think one of the former clinic or podcast interviews we talked about, there was a difference between certain people who really are trainers and people who are more showmen, and those are not necessarily the same skill. And so there are a decent number of very successful showmen who have won a lot of money, but that's the specific part of this they excel at. If you leave that horse with them in training for 2 years, that horse will be worse at the end of the 2 years, not better. And so their area is in showing the horse, not in actually making the horse better. There are people that are better with colts and green horses. There are people that are more into the refinement side. Of course, you can split that up by discipline. If you're wanting to show in reining, following dressage may not be the most time efficient thing you could do, and vice versa. So make sure they're consistent with their message. Make sure that the product that they produce is actually a product you would want, and that there aren't things going on in their horses that you don't like. And then probably the last part of it, this would be a critique I would have of the world right now. We have a lot of fluff out there, and we're all guilty of it. I'm sure I've produced content that was kind of fluff too. You do feel like you have to produce some content, and you don't always really have something that you need to say, so that you wind up scrambling and trying to come up with something to fill time and make that post today or whatever it is that you're needing to do. So we're all going to be guilty of that. Some people only produce that, and I would rather, well, I mean, it would depend on my goal, I guess. But if I'm trying to learn how to train my horse, then what I would want is somebody that gives me actually actionable things to do, not just philosophical bends. And yeah, that sounds good, but what do? I don't understand what I'm supposed to do. How am I supposed to accomplish that? If you're just listening to the philosophical ramblings, then you don't necessarily have any tools that you can actually use to make things better. And some people are a little better working off the map. Most people tend to really want a recipe. And I've always been pretty skeptical of the recipe stuff, the method stuff. I call it tab A in the slot B horsemanship. I get why people want that, though. I do, because most of you are looking for the actionable, what do I do? The problem is that's going to be a very limiting way of going about it. It may be the only thing you have to start, but it's the why you're doing it that really matters, the philosophy part. So you need the philosophy part, but you also have to have the actionable side of it. We've done some talking, like the disengaging of the hindquarters. This is exactly the type of pitfall that there is to the methods and the tab A and the slot B kind of stuff, is that you learn these 7 things you're supposed to do, whatever it is, and then you just repeat forever, and you never progress beyond it. Your horse gets bored and sour, and it winds up being a very bad thing, because you spent 2 years doing something you were supposed to do for 2 weeks, and then you didn't know what more to do. And I will say there are absolutely some very successful clinicians whose entire deal is marketed around giving you just enough to get you in trouble until you come back to pay them the next installment or the next level or the next whatever the thing they have is. And some of those things are really almost predatory in nature. Like they're gonna get you in trouble and then have to save you over and over again. And I can't imagine that those things aren't by design. And so if whatever group you wind up following has any sort of feel of a cult to it, that might be a red flag, because that stuff definitely exists. What I'll say is that among the people that I really have a lot of respect for myself and that I see and I know from behind the scenes, they don't tend to be territorial. Like I don't insist that you only follow me and only come to my clinics and you must come to all of my clinics that are within 6 hours of you or I'm not going to help you anymore. I'm happy for you to go with other clinics and get other points of view. And even, I mean, if it suits you and you go to this other person's clinic and they speak your language a little better and it resonated with you more than I did, then that needs to be your person. Like there's no harm, no foul there. I think the people that are genuinely trying to help you will not be territorial or jealous of you as a customer or other clinicians. And I don't know. I'm honestly kind of surprised at how obvious the bad nature of some of these people is and how successful they are. And in spite of that, like nobody tends to read it. And I don't want to get into a crapping on other clinicians thing. Just pay attention. Go into all of these things with your eyes open. Zoom out a little bit. Don't get too sucked into the emotional stuff that, boy, that's a big hook these days. There's a lot of people peddling the emotional stuff and it makes you feel good, but there isn't actually any content there. There's nothing there that is actually going to help you and benefit your horse because nothing actionable was said. You can disagree with me on this. That's perfectly fine. Could be a personality difference thing, but I want actionable stuff taught to me that I can take home and do. And I want to know, I want a little context with it too. I don't like the people that set me up where here's a very short interval of stuff you need to work on and you'd better come back and spend some more money with me or you're going to screw things up by disengaging your horse's hindquarters for the next 7 years, and then you can't pick up a canter on the correct lead to save your life because you ruined your horse by not paying the next installment, learning how to ransom all the problems you just created. Okay, that's enough of that. Another question that we got, this was kind of on the ethics and morals side and the current revolving black eyes that the horse industry has gotten in the last few months. And basically the question was, what can I do as an amateur in sort of my duty to this industry and its overall health? What can I do? I'm not a professional. I'm not teaching people. I'm not writing magazine articles. I'm just an owner who has a horse and I want to do the best for my horse. What can I do? Part of what you can do is not be super negative on social media. There are definitely some groups out there that only exist to showcase the worst aspects of humanity, all of the drama, all of the negativity. You post a picture or a video in there of some other person riding, and then you get 700 comments on what a crappy rider they are and all. I am constantly amazed by how big those groups get and how much activity they have in them. So the very first thing I would tell you, if you're interested in the health of the horse industry, is to not participate in those types of groups or those types of discussions. I, for whatever reason, really don't get too many negative comments across social media. I think in In YouTube, I have maybe deleted like 12 or 15 comments in about as many years. In Facebook, it's probably pretty close to the same, other than the t-shirt scammers and all that stuff. And I apologize. We've been having like one of those a day on Facebook lately. So it's like a game of whack-a-mole trying to get rid of those people. But as far as people coming in just being really negative and really dramatic, for whatever reason, I don't have near as much of that as some other people that I see. Complaining and whining does not help. It doesn't get anything effective accomplished. Proposing solutions, being thoughtful, being rational and not emotional, these are the things that actually will help move the ball down the field. The Charlotte Duhardine video is a really good example of this. Like, the cancel culture thing, her just getting dogpiled by the world. Her getting dogpiled by the world on social media did absolutely nothing to change a whipping that a horse got 2 years ago or 4 years ago. For a bunch of people who typically tend to think it's incredibly immoral to ever punish a horse, they seem to find it incredibly satisfying to punish people. I'm not quite sure how that works out all in the same brain, but it seems to be a relatively common thing. So how do we avoid the negative things? First of all, if you do actually witness real abuse, call it out. Like I mean, in the moment, right then and there. 3 weeks later, 3 years later on social media, like you didn't do any good at that point. Like if you're standing there witnessing stuff being done to a horse that really shouldn't be done to a horse, that's the time to step in. You pulling out your phone and recording it and then posting it to social media, I'd say your motives are pretty suspicious at that point. It's hard to claim the moral high ground when all you did was record the interaction. You didn't actually do anything to stop the interaction. To me, the education of this is the real long-term viable solution. And thankfully, more of that exists today in the world than ever has before. Social media does have its pitfalls and its hellholes, but we do have this ability to communicate and transmit information instantaneously around the world at this point. And so I don't want to say this to sound too self-serving, but like when you come across good posts, share them, educate your friends, point your friends to people that'll be helpful, not necessarily the popularized stuff. We really seem to be very addicted to the fluff that doesn't help so much, and a lot less interested in the actual hard helpful information that's the solution. So again, I'm not saying directly just with me share my stuff more. It's not just my stuff. There really are a good many people out there with good information. I'm pretty often surprised by some of the articles that'll cross my feed, and I look at it, it's got 600 shares and it's nothing of consequence. And then I'll have another post that comes across that someone shared and it's got 20 shares, and I'm like, holy crap, that is like a very insightful piece of information. I've never heard anyone communicate or share an idea like that. Like that's a true original thought, very helpful, and it doesn't get near the attention as the comical thing or the draft horse grabbing the little girl by the ponytail and throwing her down. We are for whatever reason attracted to the wrong stuff. So if it is in your heart to be a steward of the industry and of the animals, and you are, like I am, concerned for the preservation of this going forward, share the good, helpful stuff. As an amateur, that is what you can do. You're not necessarily going to produce the content yourself, but when you come across stuff that is good and helpful, like pass that on. This podcast, I think we're all due humility, I think we're just knocking the hell out of this thing, and I'm very proud of some of the conversations we've had. Share it, make this a regular part of a lot more people's day. And I think you will have done something to help the industry as a whole. Speaking of the podcast, I am getting a lot of encouragement to do something that I really hate, which is kind of the self-promotion stuff. But I am somewhat regularly told by people that I've seen in social media their name. They've been following me for a long time, and then they say, "Oh, I didn't know you did that." And I'm kind of like, "You've been following me for 3 years. How did you not know I did that?" So I thought I would take a little time and talk for a few minutes, not a long time, about some of the things that we do. One of those is virtual lessons. So that started with COVID. I will say I was pretty skeptical of that at first. I didn't want to just dive headlong into virtual lessons because I want to be sure that we're actually providing value. I don't want to just be taking people's money or wasting their time. And I wasn't real sure how virtual lessons would go. I've now been doing those for maybe 3 years or so. And I would actually say I've been very pleasantly surprised at how effective they are. We've got some regulars that we're doing lessons with on a regular basis, and then I have plenty of one-offs and even some bit consultations and things like that. So if you haven't tried virtual lessons with someone, I would say it's worthwhile. It really is. I charge the same thing for it that I do for an in-person lesson. It's $80 for an hour. And if you do the virtual lesson, I'll record it, send it to you afterwards so you can watch that again and again and again. You can see what I was seeing when I said this. And I think it's a heck of a value. I really do. And especially if you're not finding in your local area the caliber of help that you might need. I'm not going to say that it's just me. I've got plenty of friends that are very high level horse people, and they could help you as well. So if you've been hesitating on virtual lessons, I think it's not nearly as technically difficult. All you need is a smartphone and some kind of a little tripod. You can buy those tripods on Amazon for $20 and an internet connection and then Bluetooth headphones, and you can do it all by yourself. Now, if you've got help that'll stand in the arena and move the camera and all, that's better. If you've got one of the Pivio or Pixio deals or Sure Shot or whatever, there's a way to do lessons through that too, where it'll follow you all around the arena, just depending on your level of financial commitment to that and technical savvy. But I will say, like, there was a horse that was neurologic in a different country that I was able to watch on video and said, "Hey, I think you need to get your vet to look into this." And turned out we were right. And there have been multiple other people far away, way too far away to haul in and do lessons. And we can do lessons regularly and help people pretty far away. So if you didn't know that we did that, you can message me or email me and we'll set that up with you. Clinics is pretty much my favorite thing to do. I like the interaction with people and their horses. I did not become a horse trainer or a clinician to sit behind a computer and write articles or to film myself doing videos. The part I enjoy is the interaction with the people and the horses, and the virtual lessons are good for that. But clinics, having me right there where I can put hands on things, I can see if your horse maybe is a little sore here or adjust that bridle for you or whatever the thing might be. Like, I don't think there's any substitute for that. One of the things I always say about clinics, I know every clinician kind of has their spiel and you've heard it 10 times and they kind of wind up in some loop and you've already heard this before. The thing you can't get from social media is that person putting eyes on your horse. And so even though you may have heard all of it, putting what you heard into practice in real time is different. And I cannot tell you how many times I've had someone that I knew, they'd asked me questions and things before, and maybe we'd had phone calls, whatever. And then we get to a clinic, and when I can actually see their horse, I realize the problem that they have is not the problem they thought they had. And that's why we haven't been able to solve this. So I'm not just saying this for me, but clinics seem to be almost going downhill a little bit these days. And I don't understand that. Like, there is no substitute for getting a highly skilled, highly experienced person's eyes on you and your horse. There's just no way you can replicate that. And so take advantage of it. We are looking for more and more clinic hosts around the country and even the world. There's a possibility we'll be doing some more stuff in Europe and maybe Australia. So don't feel like you're bothering me. If you might be interested in having a clinic out your way or something, we're pretty easy to work with. I definitely try to be as flexible and easygoing about that. You don't have to have an ice chest of my favorite specialty water there or anything like that. We're pretty down to earth and pretty easy to work with. And ultimately, we just want to help people and help their horses and keep all this going smoothly and cleanly. We also do presentations. This is becoming more and more popular, and I do worry a little bit I'm going to wind up getting pigeonholed just with this bit stuff. That being said, I think I've got some really important information on that you're not going to find other places. And so I'm happy to continue to do it because it is very helpful and very needed. So we've done several of those this year. Jim Masterson has even flown me to England to do a presentation with bits. We'll be doing more of those in the expo type setting next year. We've also done some standalone events where, like, I may travel to a town for a 3-day weekend and we do a 1 day as a PowerPoint kind of a lecture where you can ask questions and those sorts of things. And I'll have some visual aids and a whiteboard to draw on, and we go through all of that stuff. And then we'll do 2 days of working with horses and riders and make the adjustments and change the things and make suggestions on how to use your hands better. And what your horse really needs is this. And then you can watch the changes occur in the horse in real time. That's honestly something I would like to do more. Those presentations have been I really try not to present stuff in a manner where it's a just take my word for it kind of thing. And when I have the horse there and we can see, because I always start out, you're going to just do what you normally do for the first 5 or 10 minutes, and we're going to see what that looks like. And then I'm going to make the changes. And I mean, the horse tells you whether I got it wrong or I got it right. Like that's the undeniable part of it. And so far we've made some pretty good changes in all of those horses at those presentations. So if you might be interested in having me do a presentation, not necessarily a clinic, we do that. We do bit consultations. So like if you have a large lesson barn with 30 horses in it and you want to bring me over there for a weekend and we do some fitting and consultations and watch each of those horses go and make individualized suggestions, we can do that as well and kind of help you out with that communication and getting those horses a lot more relaxed and set up to succeed rather than to tolerate. On the expo end, I have applied for a good many expos, and I don't know the names or necessarily contact for all of the expos. So if you have got one in your area you'd like to see me at, please shoot me an email. I'm easy to do that. There's contact forms right on the website or Facebook messages or however you want to get in touch with me. Feel free to reach out to those expos and suggest to them, hey, I know this guy, he's got some pretty cool stuff to say. Maybe y'all should look into him. All of that helps. We do still have the bit video available. I think I've got a few DVDs left. We're not going to be getting any more. So if you're interested in those, grab up the last few. They may be collector's items one day or something, but all the future sales of that will only be as the digital download. That's the original 5.5-hour video that we spent several years working on, and that video is being used as a teaching resource in about 25 U.S. universities in the equine sciences and studies program. We also now have the online bit course, thebitcourse.com. I'll have a link to that in the description. So that is the video that I did more fleshed out. The original video, the bit video, the 5.5-hour video is in the course. So you'll see that video in its entirety throughout the course. But I also get to go back in and make some adjustments, add some things. So the course is significantly larger than the video. It also has a study guide that comes along with it. So it's going to highlight and bring your attention to, hey, by the way, this particular sentence I said, this was a really important sentence, and it'll ask you some questions. You have to fill in the blanks, basic study stuff, kind of brings your focus to, and then you have that to refer back to. That study guide's like 70 pages long or something like that. The bit course, we will have this out soon. It's not available right this minute when this podcast is going to come out, but it should be within the next several weeks. We're going to have 2 levels to that. So one is what we'll call the evergreen version. It will be available anytime, and it is a self-directed course. So it's at a modest price point, we think, considering the content that's involved and the extensive nature of it. And you can get that, you download it, it gives you all the modules and the videos right away, and the study guide, you go through that on your own. You got 6 months to get through it or something like that. And I think that's a pretty viable option. We've also got the Behemoth, which is the masterclass version of that course. So we do those quarterly. That is a 7-week course, so it actually has an extra module than what the evergreen course will have. Practical, basically. And so in that masterclass course, this is really like the pearl on the top of the mountain for what we're offering. The masterclass version, you get access to a module every week, and then during that week, toward the end of it, we will have a masterclass Zoom call where we'll go over the study guide for that portion, and then you can ask questions and we'll flesh it out and really try to make sure everybody has a full understanding of what's going on. If you can't make the masterclass for a week, you can email me the question that you might have or questions ahead of time, and I'll read those off on the masterclass. All of those are recorded and put back in. So if you miss one, you could still go back and watch the content that we had that week. Sometimes we have special guests that come in and join us so that you get a little extra there. I'll say this, like the masterclass version is incredibly comprehensive. You're also eligible to take a test at the end of that to become a certified bidding consultant, which is much more extensive than a bit fitter, the information that we're putting out there. And that is really a course that you need to kind of look at like a college class. It is in total going to be 7 weeks long and somewhere in the neighborhood of 30 hours in length. So it is a commitment, but you're going to learn a whole new universe will be in front of you if you go through that course with us. We do actually have a clinic coming up that I don't think is full yet. It is in the Cleveland, Ohio area at a place called Sand Hill Stable. I did a virtual lesson with the owner of that stable. It seems like a very nice couple that's running it, and I can see they're doing a lot of stuff, really trying to be a hub of information and clinics and resources in that area. I know we're doing that as it'll kind of have a beginning novice horsemanship clinic group of only 6 riders in the morning, and then a more advanced group in the afternoon. So you'd ride 2 days in either of those groups, depending on your skill level. So it'll be just 6 riders in the group, a lot of individual attention. And as with all of our clinics, we do type up a pretty extensive set of notes. It's usually something like 20 pages of notes that you'll get in an email after the clinic. So you'll have reminders of what we worked on and probably 6 months worth of homework of things to continue working on. And unlike some of the clinicians I talked about before, I try to be pretty comprehensive with that. So you get the basic level, the next step, the pitfalls to look out for. And we want you to be successful ultimately. And if you come ride with me again the next year, I don't want you to be facing the same problems. You should have solved those and be on to some new problems. Otherwise, I would feel like I failed you. So we do set everything up to try to help you succeed to the best of our ability. Also, we have got a few more podcasts coming out. I wanted to tell you all about. The next one that'll come out will be Will Friday. He is a Masterson Method certified practitioner out in California. He's also pretty big into the nutritional stuff. I met him at an event and we talked, and I thought he would be a pretty good interview. So that one will be out next week. The one after that will be a lady, Miss Noche Miller. She is a positive reinforcement specialist. She also teaches tricks to cows. She has a Guinness World Record of the most number of cow tricks performed in a minute. So she actually reached out to me and felt like I wasn't being fair on positive reinforcement and all of that stuff. And she sort of wanted to come on the podcast and plead her case. And so she does that. She also is a believer in whirls on horses. So the hair swirls, cowlick type stuff, and those being revealing about a horse. I'm pretty skeptical on that. So if you're interested in those things, you can listen to a civil discussion between two adults that does not devolve into name calling or anything like that. But I'll just, if you listen to very many podcasts, you know my feelings on positive reinforcement, and I am very skeptical on the whole validity of whirls being actually important. So if you're interested in those, then that'll be one coming up. We have also got Miss Carrie Lake, who I was a presenter with at an event earlier this year. I'll also be on her podcast coming out, Compass Conversations. And Carrie is full on into the woo-woo and the feelings and all of that. I do think she's a very genuine person. And I will just flat out say I was not completely sure how the conversation with her was going to go, whether I would be able to continue to have good questions to ask her and so forth. And that was one of those that could have gone on for hours and hours and hours. I think it actually will be one of the better podcasts we're going to put out this whole year. So be sure to check that one out. And then we'll also have, I haven't recorded this one yet, or these two yet, but Ben Longwell does mostly the Vaquero stuff. He's been in New Zealand for a while and on, now he's in Oregon. He'll be on after that. And then we will have Gretchen Dean. Gretchen is a neuromuscular equine dentist. And I have a lot of things I want to pick her brain about. She's a pretty interesting young lady, and I think that'll be a very good one as well. And then we of course have a bunch of others lined up. Just haven't had the logistics. Some of these people are very busy, and it may take a month before our schedules will allow for half of a day to be blocked off for us to have our conversation. So I will ask if y'all are enjoying the podcast. Like I said earlier, please share it. As you can tell, we're not trying to monetize this or anything like that. This really is about having good conversations and bringing maybe some unique or some more fleshed out perspectives. I do like this long form where we really can get deeper than most people ever have the opportunity to get. So if you are enjoying it and appreciating it, please share it. Help us grow it. We are right at the top 5% of all podcasts, but there's still a lot of room at the top we could climb to, and we would certainly appreciate you helping us to get the message and these conversations more and more out into the world. Okay, that's all I've got for this Q&A. Also, let me know if you like the Q&As. I've had a little bit of mixed success with them. I was doing them pretty regularly at the beginning. One of them is one of the more downloaded episodes we've ever had. I don't really have a dog in this fight. I probably enjoy having the conversations with the other guests more. But if you appreciate the Q&As and you want more Q&As, let me know. Without feedback, I'm just wandering around in the dark. So the feedback helps a lot to let me know what type of content you appreciate and want more of. All right, we'll see y'all next Monday. Thank you for joining in, and have a good one.
We'll see you next week for another episode of Adult Onset Horsemanship. I've been your host, Daniel Dauphin.